What is up, everybody? I have my good friend, Mr. Ryan Muckenhern, across from me. Now, Ryan, we talk about a lot of cool things on this podcast. We talk about cool cartridges, other cool products, really neat topics. And today, in my opinion, we're talking about a cool gun. This is kind of like a cool gun highlight. What'd you say? You were coming up with a name for like what we were doing today.
A firearm feature.
A featured
firearm.
Yeah, featured firearm, which does have alliteration, which I always like. Ryan, this is one of mine. Probably one of my own, my personal, I guess, cooler guns, right? Like, it's one of the older guns that I personally own. I feel like it's a unique firearm. And one of the reasons why I know it's cool is you always comment that you really like it. And you like cool guns.
I do.
This is the Savage Model 24. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about this thing. It ain't new.
It's not. It's pretty old. It's old enough that it doesn't actually have a serial number on it.
Exactly. That in my readings, because see, you know a lot of this stuff, and then I read about it to learn about it, so I have some sort of baseline when we come in here. But yeah, the early models didn't have serial numbers. In fact, we just looked. We double confirmed. So it's kind of difficult to find out or ascertain when it's made, but you can do that, I guess, within like a margin of error by like the model, because the model's changed over time. Different features, different things. Some you could say were an advancement, and then, maybe as things move forward, it's not so much an advancement.
Yeah.
What do you know about the old Savage Model 24? Let's talk about its lineage.
Sure. Imagine if you were a lad of 12 and you were looking for the most practical firearm that a lad of 12 can own.
I know.
And this is what I think about when I think of Model 24s. You might encounter a rabbit, you might encounter a squirrel, you might encounter a quail, maybe a grouse, possibly a pheasant, who knows? And you want to beg your father, your uncle, your grandfather, your mother to get you the gun. The year is sometime between 1938 and I'm just going to say 1970 for nostalgia purposes.
Yep.
And this is the gun. It's a combination gun.
It's a combination gun.
Which is not common in the U.S. anymore.
No.
Europe, quite popular.
So, and we should describe what by combination gun, this is a 22-410, which actually, I've always just called this a 22-410, like just intuitively. And then as I was looking it up, when it was originally made by Stevens, the model was the 22-410.
Yeah. Which
I thought was pretty cool. It's a
mouthful, though.
The way you described it is why I bought it. Now, I bought this. I was an adult, but I was like, dude, that is a small game special.
Oh yeah.
Like, and I was drawn to it because I was like, oh man, this is the perfect truck gun for grouse, or like you said, just going out.
Who knows what you're going to encounter?
Small game. I've dove hunted with it.
Yep. You're gonna have a small game tag in your pocket, and the parameters of what small game encompasses is vast, depending on where you live. And this could do it all.
Yeah. So originally 1938, made by Stevens. They quit making it in 1950. And then Savage basically, I don't know the inner workings of how they did it, but then Savage started producing essentially the same rifle from kind of 1950 on, ish. Till up, I don't know when they quit actually making the Model 24.
2010.
Okay. And now it's the Model 42, which kind of has some commonality.
Yeah.
But it's a break action.
Yes.
Now, from what I understand, it's a unique break action. The way it operates, like, it seems like when I look at it, I go, yeah, it's like a over under that I've used before. But I think there's some unique traits to it that I'm not quite sure what makes it unique. But it sounds like it's its own design from what I know.
Yeah, I mean, it's got some characteristics that are found on similar guns. So as Mark had mentioned, it is a hinge breach or a break action gun. Tang operates both directions, which I think is cool and classy. Mm-hmm. Lockup on this, and we were talking about this last night when Mark had brought it in.
You commented on that.
This is a gun of an era bygone that reminds me of how things used to be. And when I open this gun up, and I've done quite a bit of shooting with break action shotguns. Its lockup is bank vault. It is just so. It's absolutely brilliant. And like this was an inexpensive firearm of its day. This was not a peerless grade shotgun. This was not a high end rig, but it was put together as if it was. And I really actually appreciate that. From the extraction mechanism to the lockup to the selector, something we learned yesterday. If we look at the color case hardening on the side of the receiver here, on the right side of the receiver, we can see that the color case is kind of burnished a little bit, and it's faded from time anyways and patinaed. But there was a very distinct part that was here at one time and is no longer. In doing a little bit of research, and this is something I've actually never seen, they had a button selector on earlier models that you would select between top and bottom barrel on the side. As I went on to read, this was not a failure of a mechanism, but was somewhat prone to breakage. And so later models then had a retrofitted selectable hammer. So the initial model was just a plain hammer. And then now they have the firing pin selection mechanism on the hammer. And
then I think the way I understand it, and I could be not understanding exactly correctly, but then I think even some models just went to that style.
Yep.
Now the one that I have here, like you said, like what I am not sure. So I was reading a cool article actually. Where was this from? I'm going to give these guys a shout out. It was from.
Oh, that one has the button.
From ProjectUpland.com.
Sure.
Right. And so, and I was actually even trying to understand, I highlighted it here. Jim would hate me for my printouts right now. So I'm going to quote this from this article, really cool article. It says, to address some functional issues with the side selector, Savage redesigned and introduced a selector integral to the hammer. It was a small thumb actuated throw lever. Later production changes moved the familiar top lever to the side of the action. And others moved to a press button in front of the trigger guard.
So what they're referring to is the hinge.
Oh, okay.
Right here.
Okay, gotcha.
That became a side lever. And then forward to the trigger guard.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sure. Okay, I'm picking up what you're laying down.
Yeah.
Another thing I also learned was approximately 15,000-ish were purchased by the military as survival guns.
Yep.
So this saw, potentially
very storied history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows where this one has been? There's definitely a few dings and marrings on it that, like you said, it probably does tell a few stories. One notable one, this kind of crescent moon shaped. That's significant.
That's a big mark.
You wonder, if whoever was carrying that, they either remember what they were hammering with this, or they remember where they fell.
That's possible. But I think, coming back to the arm itself, what I guess makes me so excited is because it was a, quote, cheap gun.
Right.
And I look at it, and I mean, it's not fancy. It's got a piece of pretty peach crate wood on it.
Yeah.
But the wood to metal fit is great for what it is. I mean, it's great. And the stock is swollen from years. I mean, it's got dings, and it's got chips and a little bit of cracking up at the front of the wrist where it meets the receiver, and it's oil soaked. But when it was new, it had pretty darn impressive wood to metal fit. It was color case hardened, which was a very attractive finish. The lockup is extraordinary. It's a tight gun. And you just don't see that as much as I wish we would these days, unless you start going to some pretty upper crust models of a firearm. And what I think is, of course, super novel about it is that combination. So I disassembled the gun for those watching.
Well, and I'd also say, so that's a notable feature of it too, is it breaks down.
Yeah,
right.
You put it in a backpack.
Which I think, I think that was part of that survival component too, which probably made it attractive is, sure, you could store this just about anywhere.
Yep. So top barrel, in this case, is a 22 long rifle. Bottom barrel's 410 shotgun. These came in a smattering of chamberings.
Right.
The coolest one I've ever seen, I believe, when I was working for a gun shop, we bought it in Louisiana, and it was a 357 Remington Maximum.
Okay.
Over 20 gauge.
Yep.
Which was super neat 357 Rem Max is a brilliant cartridge and very obscure.
Mm-hmm.
And think of like a 357 Magnum, but longer. And that's literally all it is.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of powder is just increased. The case length is increased. Very powerful cartridge, like certainly an adequate big game cartridge.
Mm-hmm.
Deer, bear, probably even elk. I mean, it's approaching 35 Remington from a performance standpoint, over 20 gauge. And there's like a neat niche collector group out there that looks for these things in the weird and obscure chamberings.
Right.
Yeah. 30-30 over 12 gauge, 223 over 12.
22 Hornet.
Yep.
22 long, 22 WMR.
Yeah.
They made a lot of different models, and like you said, if a person was into these, you could really, collect them all.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know. It might be difficult.
It would, and they've gone up in value considerably. I mean, this was, back in the day when I was working at that shop. I mean, firearms worth a couple $100, right?
Mm-hmm.
And usually the lady or gentleman who was going to buy it was probably buying it for nostalgia's sake. Like they had one growing up, and they're like, or my dad had one, or my uncle had one, or my grandpa had one. And so they're like, man, I really want that. I mean, the practical application of it is debatable, right? Like, is it better to have this or a Ruger 1022 if you're squirrel hunting? Well, I guess it depends on how you view the world. But they've kind of fallen out of favor, and now the collector market has ramped them up. I mean, these things are going for considerable money.
Yeah.
Which is, I just think, fantastic. As we mentioned before, combination guns in the U.S. are pretty scarce. Not a popular thing. Europe, a little bit different story, where you can order combination guns from a lot of the major European manufacturers that make shotguns and rifles.
Mm-hmm.
And, their utility is understated, I think. I mean, shooters like those, they could be walking in a state or a piece of ground, and they might encounter a stag or a boar or a pheasant or a capercaillie or who knows, where you have to make a decision like, oh, perfect. I'm out on walkabout today. Here is a black grouse. I'm switching to the shotgun barrel, taking it. I'll shoot the black grouse. Boom. Red stag runs out from behind the pines. Switch to the center fire barrel, and you've got a meal.
You do. And like you said, just the versatility, the practicality. Like if I had this thing as a kid and lived, with a back 40, the adventures would have been endless, right? But I was out with my girls the other day. We went for a little walkabout, kind of a combination of squirrels and rabbits. We didn't come away successful, but there were definitely times where, like, we're walking, and I might, maybe we're going through a little bit of a timber patch. I'm like, switch this thing to 22, scanning for squirrels up above, and then you get to a spot, you're like, this is a little bit of a bunny spot, and then boom, flip over to the 410.
Yep.
So, I just love it. This one also has some, unique, I'd say, intentionally integrated markings into it. Has one of the previous owners' driver's license number engraved in it.
Yep.
Has the initials of one of the people that owned it here, JC. So I always like to say I've got a gun that was owned by the big guy himself, and I find that unique too. And you were saying that was a kind of a common thing folks would do at some point in time.
One of my favorite things, and we've talked about this on podcasts before. I've mentioned a term that I stole from my former employer, American Sporter, in which a rifle was brought back from an era of conflict or an area of conflict. So think like 1903 Springfield, 1917 Remington, a German Mauser, a Japanese Arisaka, and they bring them back, they sporterize them, they make them into their hunting rifle. And and we saw this on guns of yore a lot from the 50s and 60s and even in the 70s. They take an electro pencil and they put their driver's license number in there. And it was just something you did. And the number of old guns that I had come into the shop that had the DL, in our case it was Minnesota, it's just MNDL on there, and then it would have the number sequence. I found it like an endearing attribute to the gun.
Sure.
Like, was the thing molested? Absolutely. But I think in a way that, I don't know, I'm pretty nostalgic if you haven't. I just love it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I think the true hat trick is when you had the gun, it had a compass that was drilled and inletted into the stock. It had like an old Weaver K series, steel tube, fixed magnification, 2.5, 3x, whatever. Electro-penciled into the tube was the DL number. Electro-penciled into the gun was the DL number. Like that was the holy trinity of vintage firearms for me growing up. So I thought it was super neat. But yeah, this gentleman, old JC, did indeed put the number onto the barrel and to the receiver. And I just think it's fantastic.
Well, and then it makes me wonder, like, are these the same person?
I hope so.
It might be, but this could have been, JC could have been some kid that didn't want to get his gun mixed up with, Tommy next door.
Yeah.
And then who knows or maybe later on he got his driver's license. Well, I better put that on there too. Or maybe it's two completely different people. I don't know. There's just so many unknown stories. It's kind of fun to, I guess, just to wonder, what this thing has seen over time.
What I think would be a marvelous thing to do, and I'm not being silly. You send this off to Doug Turnbull, and you have the gun rolling restored. I'm talking, we are going to recolor case the receiver. We're going to re-blue. We're going to polish. We're going to strip that stock, sand it down, fix the chips, raise the dents, brand new finish on it, and you put an MB on the back of that rascal. It'll probably run somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000. It'll be worth it.
Like, so I love that idea, but in the same breath, I feel like you're stripping away the history.
You're adding a new layer.
But I can just add my own layer by using it and making my own memories with it.
I think you should send it to Doug Turnbull.
We'll ask. We'll ask. What do you guys think? What should we do with this?
Mark sent it to Dougie.
Yeah, I mean, so when I got this firearm, Ryan, I was working at Cabela's in Nebraska at the time.
Yep.
And just, peruse the used rack every once in a while. And this thing was up there. And I know it was in fairly rough shape, obviously not new. But I was just, I shot my first grouse with just a single shot Stevens 410,
yep.
Right? And for some reason with this, I was just drawn to it. And I was like, and I bought it that day. And you know me, I don't.
You're not an impulsive person.
I'm not. I don't make impulsive purchases, right? And I was like, I'd seen them before. I'd heard about them. I'd never necessarily seen one, for sale or that was available. And I'm like, I'm gonna get that, and I'm glad I did.
I'm very jealous. I am, because I exploited opportunities, or rather, I didn't exploit the opportunity. I walked away from them. That 357 Max over 20 would have been a neat piece to have. I think I'd rather have it in a configuration like this, 410 and 22, just because I think I'd get more use out of it. But I think it's
to me, this is kind of like the quintessential.
Yeah. Super neat gun. I will not pass the opportunity if it is presented again to have a gun like this. And I can't do that to myself any longer. This is a neat firearm.
Some later models, they actually separated the barrels, mm-hmm. which presented some point of impact problem. But they separated it because of the cost of production. Mm-hmm. In fact, I was asking you about that because I was like, it almost like appeared that like something had happened here at mm-hmm. some point in time, and you're like, no, they just soldered together. That's how they did it.
Yep. No, it's very clever. Windage adjustable rear sight. Very low profile front sight, so if you did have to shoot something on the wing, and that's pretty characteristic of combination guns. And if you look at some of the European models, they'll often have very low profile sights. Because I don't know that the precedence is necessarily put on the shotgun, but from the shooter's perspective, it's much easier to shoot winged game, that's flying, moving, of course, with low profile sights, because we don't want to actually distract from the target while we're tracking that bird through the air. So very low profile sights, which is super clever, but not dysfunctional sights. So we still have elevation adjustment with a simple elevator. So the spring steel rear sight lifts up, the elevator moves back, so we can.
You realize I've never moved that, right? And it was like wherever it was.
It's back to where it was.
Okay.
Yeah. Windage adjustable through a simple dovetail in the rear, and then this super clever, cute, small, low snag, low drag front sight.
Yeah. It's accurate.
So you've put it on paper?
Yeah.
Oh,
I've shot paper with it. I've shot, your classic 10 cans. I've shot some clays with it. Shot a few doves with it.
Which
some rabbits.
Which barrel did you use for the doves?
The 410.
Oh, okay.
I've mostly actually ended up using the 410.
Yeah, I get it.
But yeah, it's cool, man. I really like it. It's a fun gun and almost one that I feel like I'm actually going to start using more. I think just because we we brought it out, we've been looking at it. I'm like, I should just take this thing out. I will say, so when I've hunted rabbits with it, there's been why I've transitioned back. I'm going to go carry a 12 gauge because I'm always, rabbit flushes. I'm like, bam, darn it, and I like having those extra.
So you hunt rabbits with a 12 gauge as well?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That doesn't make me a bad person. A lot of people do that. You're judging.
No, I'm not, Mark. We've talked about it before. I hold you to a different standard.
Well, maybe when we go out, I'll bring.
I'll tell you what.
Bring this one, and I'll make my first shot count.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. That'll be a clever tool to have, especially when we hunt snowshoes.
Now we're pot committed.
We've always been committed, Mark.
This is good though, because now when I'm like, well, I have to go snowshoe hunting.
You heard it here. Mark has to come with. He has to come with.
We've been talking about
10 likes, and he has to come with.
We've been talking about a winter camp snowshoe hunt for a long time.
Because
we have those here.
At least 8 years.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Maybe this year's the year. I can't guarantee I'm going to bring this though.
I would hope you do. I really would hope you do.
I like to, I'd say particularly with rabbits, you can gauge your lead with the first shot.
That's true.
This doesn't afford you that that luxury, latitude.
I would hope that you do bring this with, because I think it would do some absolute justice on a snowshoe hare. And I think that it would just be the perfect gun. I truly do.
I'll think about it.
Okay. I'll bring a backup 20 gauge, because there is a law on our books that says that they shall not be killed with something larger than a 20 bore.
That's not
16 is fine.
That's a made-up rule.
It's a law in our books.
I haven't seen that book yet.
Well,
Ryan, did we miss anything about this?
No. I think we generally covered the ins and outs of the Model 24 and its operating system. Very clever, very well built gun, very well put together gun. Nothing goofy, gimmicky. It's an intelligent design. I wish there was more place for the combination gun in our modern society, and I think it would. I think it would bring us back to a simpler time when things were better.
I don't disagree. I'm going to make one more. This is like a personal observation.
Please.
I love the way this gun carries and feels and shoulders and points.
Very intuitive gun.
It's just a good one. So.
I think so. I think you have a real gem here, Mark.
I appreciate that,
and I'm excited
Ryan.
when this gets back from Turnbull Restorations. Because then it's going to go not just from a historical piece, but like a bespoke historical piece. And you will have entered a new season in your life.
So here's what I'm going to say. I am highly likely not going to do that. But I am curious to know from folks out there who've listened, would you think this gun would be better restored, or would that detract from the history that it's got just built in, kind of just a little bit rougher right now?
10 likes. Mark sends it to Doug Turnbull Restorations.
Yeah, I don't know where this 10 likes thing came from, but anyway,
stay tuned, pal.
Thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah.
Did this bring back any nostalgia for you? Do you have one of these? Did you have one of these growing up? Do you still use one? Have you taught your kids to hunt with it? Was it their first gun?
Were you jealous of your neighbor who had one?
Yeah. Were you jealous of your neighbor that had one?
Yeah.
Let us know. And until next time, happy hunting and shooting. Bye, everybody.